Looks like it kicked it off.
It's looking pretty good.
Sweet. Hello, everybody. Yeah, that was totally unexpected. Anyway, trying to figure out how to stream with two things to two channels. We'll get started then. Well, let me make sure. Oh, yeah, is everybody live? I got to mute myself so I don't hear me talking. There we go. Okay, cool. Anyway, yeah, we're streaming to both channels. I'm gonna link Charles's channel in chat too. The description is all wrong. It copied my description from the previous channel. So yeah, we were going to talk about clean code, architecture, solid principles, and just answer questions and stuff. Give me 30 seconds to link Charles's channel though in the description because that's not. I had all the wrong stuff in there.
This is my first stream, so let me see if I can. I'm learning this thing here, so I'm going to send this out to my Discord folks. Let them know I'm doing this.
All right, I just linked it in the description below too. So yeah, we're just gonna take questions, talk about clean code stuff, and that's about it. Just stuff that we're both interested in, and we just thought it'd be fun to just chat and talk together and do a stream together. So if you've got questions, drop them in the chat, and somehow I'm gonna figure out how to open up the stream thing and see what the questions are.
Come through.
Yeah, I just I lost my window for it, so I gotta figure out how to get the live stream window, editing window back, like the monitoring window. I'm not sure where that is.
Get some nice. Hey, Mert, thanks, and D3 generative. Appreciate it. Appreciate the love there.
So how do you know how to get back to that thing? The live view of your streams.
Yeah, if you go to your the studio beta, and then I think if you go to videos, and then at the top if you hit live.
Okay, so I can do. Okay, I got. Oh, that's right. And then is it the little drop down in there? Yeah, that's right. The options drop down has a no. How do I get to the management thing of that?
Yeah, it's like a management thing. Yeah.
Oh, view live control room. There it is. It's that little button that looks like a circle, and then the thingy is going out. Okay, cool. So now I can pull the control room over. I can actually see the questions, and we can maybe answer stuff, and people can hop on. Oh, it says that our video resolution is too high. Hopefully that's okay. I don't know. I'm streaming at 4K. I don't know. We'll see.
I sound a bit not much loud. Do I need to turn up my microphone?
You might need to.
Charles at all? I'm gonna turn up my. Am I loud?
You're very loud. Let me turn you up. It might just be on my end that you're not loud enough.
We'll get the hang of this.
Yeah. Sorry, everybody. Just kind of getting this all figured out. If I put on headphones, actually, that's probably gonna make things worse. I don't know.
I also have some echo here.
Okay. Well, can anybody hear Charles?
Hey guys, can you hear me? I'll try to answer a question. I saw one about Xamarin versus Visual Studio, I think, at the top. Xamarin is a mobile framework. Charles sounds like he's coming through another mic. Xamarin is a mobile framework, so it's kind of different. I think Xamarin has its own IDE, but they're kind of two different things. Visual Studio is a code editor, and Xamarin is just a framework for creating mobile devices. Oh, Xamarin Studio. Yeah, Xamarin Studio is just basically focused. It's like Visual Studio, but it's focused on creating Xamarin applications. Whereas Visual Studio, you can create a Xamarin application inside of Visual Studio, but you can't create a normal .NET application in Xamarin Studio. Hopefully that answers your questions, Cherry, and hopefully you guys can hear me.
Yeah, I think I may have fixed your audio a little bit. I cranked you way up and just turned down my speaker, so you're not blasting me out. I just hope that nothing pops up randomly and gets really loud. We'll get it figured out better for the next one, though, for sure.
Yeah, this is pretty impromptu, but we figured, hey, why not? Let's go for it.
Seems like something fun to do.
That's the best time. That's the best way to learn. You know, even in software development, sometimes you just got to throw yourself into the fire.
Have you used Xamarin Studio much, Charles?
I actually just started using it recently for work. You know what? I can't say I've used Xamarin Studio, but I've started developing Xamarin applications. I probably should check out Xamarin Studio, but I'm really stubborn. So I was trying to use Writer.
Oh,
which you should not use Writer to develop Xamarin applications.
Oh, interesting. That makes sense. I was say because I use Writer now for all of my Unity stuff. So whenever I'm building Unity
Oh
games, it's
yeah.
all 100% in Writer.
Yes,
Yeah,
it's great. It's freaking great for Unity.
yeah, it's anybody that's not using it. If you haven't used it before, I did a video about why Writer's freaking awesome. But the main thing is that it's going to speed up your coding, and it gives a lot of really good tips on just how to write better code in general. So as you're looking through your code, it'll show you like tip after tip after tip, and it's just constantly recommending ways to improve your code that don't really require you to do too much. Like you just hit the button, it'll auto convert it, and when you want to understand why it did it, it actually gives you a link to a full document explaining why it's recommending that change, what the benefits are, which I think is one of the coolest parts because it's easy to recommend a change and like not have people know what the point of it is. And there they actually explain it kind of in detail what the reason for it is. So I thought that was
Yeah.
really cool.
Yeah, it's for those who have used ReSharper in Visual Studio, it's the same. I mean, it's created by the same company, and it's the same underlying IntelliSense engine powers both of those recommendations while you're coding.
Yeah. Let me look. I'm going to see if I got any questions here on my side too.
Cool.
Somebody was asking how to become an OOP thinker.
A lot of
Uh,
experience. You got to just throw yourself into it.
yeah, and I think doing some samples. There are a lot of good examples that really relate OOP to like real objects, right? So you can kind of see like how you would create things. But part of the problem is that sometimes that doesn't really line up with how you would want to code either. But I
Yeah.
don't know how to become a great OP thinker. I'm trying to think of that. I don't know. Other than trying a lot and doing some of those, but yeah, I don't know. I wish I had a good tip there. What do you got? You got anything else, Charles?
I mean, I think, it's just one of those things where, you just have to get the experience and, like how do you become a great writer? You write. And I think it's the same thing with becoming an OOP thinker. You just need to put yourself into situations on a consistent basis where you're going to be developing, and you're going to be putting yourself into situations where you're going to need to make decisions about the code you're writing. And then you're going to make mistakes. And I think that's extremely important. You need to go in there, you make mistakes, and then that's where you're going to learn the most. And that's how you're going to develop, a toolbox of and a library of knowledge that's going to help you in the future.
Sounds about right to me. Just practicing. Hold on, let me turn off Skype real quick too.
I'm still trying to figure out my stream here. I think it's private. Oh, it's private. Darn it. That's the problem.
Oh, okay.
All right, let me
Yeah,
make
you
this
want to
thing,
make your streams public, Charles. It tends to help a little bit.
hey, I'm just talking about coding here. I'm throwing myself into the fire, the pan here with my stream, and I'm learning.
All right.
How do you make it public?
And you just got to go onto the video. You go to your streams and then switch over, or click on the edit mode. You can
Oh,
get in there and change
darn it. And I just shared it on my Discord server, like, hey, join the stream. And they're probably just going to get a link that's like, dude.
No. All right.
Yeah, I'm getting like eyeballs and stuff.
So somebody mentioned they were never able to figure out how to get to the Unity manual from a method. That's in Writer. That's interesting. I thought it was just F1, but I guess I've never actually tried it. It's an interesting.
What was the question?
Feedback.
Sorry.
He was saying that one thing that was interesting about Writer was that, or one thing that bugged him, I think, about Writer was that he couldn't get to the Unity manuals directly from a method. Where in Visual Studio, you hit F1 and it takes you directly to the dock. Yeah.
Oh, got you.
One thing I really like in Writer is when I hit F12 on a Unity method, it actually takes me into some of the code, and I can actually see some of the underlying C# code until it gets down to the C++ layer, which is really useful.
Decompile it.
And somebody asked about any tips on writing modular code. Looks like that was Ian N. I got to start getting better at saying people's names too. I always forget about that. Like I read them and I'm like, so yeah, he was asking any tips on writing modular code. I have a lot of tips on that. Like, I don't know about you, Charles. Like my first one would just be, start off making sure that your code is, that your classes are small and that you're not writing big giant monolithic things. So immediately look for options as soon as you see code getting over a couple hundred lines, like 200 lines. But really, you want to split it out towards a single responsibility principle is kind of the general simplest rule I would recommend, where you're just having code that and I used to say it against the way that Bob Martin says it. I used to have it only do one thing, but
Mm.
really his argument for it, which makes a lot of sense, is to have it only have one reason to change. So only one source of things would cause it to change. Like if you're changing the way that this thing works, that's the only reason that it should change. Like you shouldn't have to change your health script because you've added new stun functionality or something. It should be completely like the health script should only change if health calculations are changing, right? That's it. Stuff like that, and splitting them out, using a lot of components. I think at first I used a lot of Unity components, and I may have gone a little overboard on it, but I think it's good to split things out into a good number of Unity components that you add and kind of build things up on, kind of like we do in projects. But yeah, I'm curious what you think, Charles. What would you recommend for just modular code?
Yeah, I
Anything?
mean, just to play devil's advocate on the whole single responsibility notion, I when I first was just really getting into trying to write clean code, I was really an idealist, and I would just try to follow every rule to the T. Um, but I think one thing that's a safe bet is the rule of three, and so the rule of three is if you repeat yourself, you know, one, two times, the third time is when you should try to refactor it into something that's generic. So, obviously, look, you gain experience and eventually you just kind of know what's going to need to be generic, what's going to be something like when a class is getting kind of too bloated. But I think that sometimes I almost force myself when I can't see the full picture of what I'm writing. I force myself to repeat it two times. And then the third time I say, okay, at least now I know that this is something that really does need to be modular and reusable. And not only do I know from a high level that it needs to be modular, but once you repeat something three times, you kind of get the idea of how it's expected to be used. And it's kind of a generic. I don't really have a good example off the top of my head. Maybe I'll think of one. But if you are writing a class, like for instance, let's say you're writing like a health class, like a player health, and let's say you're thinking ahead and you're like, oh, well, what is health really? Well, maybe health is really just a gauge, and what's a gauge? It's a gauge, it has a maximum capacity and goes down to zero and you fill it up. So then you start, formulating a class. It's a gauge. Look how modular and reusable that is. Well, then you start going down the rabbit hole and you might start adding features and things that you may never even need. And I'm extremely guilty of that one. I mean, I have over architected so much code in my career, only to find that most of it I would just toss out, or most of it I don't use.
Yep.
So these days, if I really don't know what it is the end product's going to be, I'll just say, listen, I'm going to break the dry rule. I'm just going to rewrite it 2-3 times. And then at the third time, I have a good idea. Hey, I still might write the gauge, but at least I know the scope of what that gauge is going to require to encapsulate, player health. So that was just one example. Hey, some folks are joining my stream here. Oh, I see. We got Jason's story here, a piece of fruit from the Discord server over on my side. Hey,
Oh,
what's up,
cool.
guys?
Hey, you got to come to the meetup tomorrow, Jason. I talk to you about some stuff. And it's tomorrow in the morning, just so you can make it. Yeah, I like that advice a lot. The dry stuff especially, because I was thinking about it even just yesterday. I was writing a method, and I'm going in here and I'm like, hey, I just repeated this chunk of code, and I had to like fight the urge to turn that into a method, and I'm like, it's 3 lines. Like it's okay to copy it, but it's okay to repeat it here. Like it's a fine balance, trying not to repeat too much and then ending up with a little bit of a mess.
Yeah. And if I'm being honest with myself, sometimes following these principles and sometimes genericizing things is a form of procrastination for me, because it's like, oh, I get to think about this one little thing, and ooh, how can I genericize this? How can I write this method? And well, maybe I'll put an interface and I'll make a generic here and there. And it's like I end up wasting so much time, but it feels good because it feels like I'm doing something, but I'm not really,
You're writing lots of code. It feels like you're building a thing. Yeah,
Yeah,
I
it
do the
really
same thing.
does.
You just find out, or you realize that, hey, I was building the wrong thing. I was building something useless, something that nobody needed, or that is just going to make my later work harder.
Yeah, yeah, for real.
Let me see if
I see a question on my side.
Go ahead.
Inheritance versus decoration. Which one do you guys prefer to achieve clean code in Unity?
Did it say decoration?
I guess the decoration pattern.
Oh, like decorator pattern? I don't really use that pattern at all, ever. I don't know if you do.
I can't remember. Think of an example. I mean, honestly, the whole thing with patterns is, you don't want to use the wrong tool for the wrong job. You don't want to grab a tool ahead of time. Jason Story, a piece of fruit. He has a good analogy. I forgot what it's called, like a hammer for a screw or something like that. I mean, you don't want to put the cart before the horse. Just figure out what your problem is, and if the decorator pattern solves it, go ahead and use that. If the inheritance solves it, then use that, I would say.
But I think that goes to a bigger thing of inheritance versus composition, which I think is where there's a much bigger split, and it's easier to say where, at least I know where I would fall there. Like, I'm a much bigger fan of composition over inheritance now. I used to be completely opposite. I don't know. And 5-6 years ago, people started talking to me and convincing me that, hey, composition is generally better because here are all the pitfalls, here are the problems. And I'd seen the problems too. They just kind of called them out. Like, oh, you end up with bloated base classes, and you end up breaking that single responsibility principle, because eventually that the stuff keeps changing in those base classes, getting more and more complex and abstract. It turns into a mess, at least. That's been my experience.
I agree.
Go ahead.
No, I was gonna say I totally agree with you. Yeah, that you just get these bloated classes. And just another point, if you think about, I would imagine most people watching are Unity developers. I mean, you want to play to the strength of the framework or engine that you're working with, and I think that Unity heavily promotes composition. You think about how you create a game object, and there's components that you attach to it. It's sort of the same. You just kind of play to the strengths of the engine.
Yeah, that's exactly what it is. Definitely, and it makes a lot of sense in Unity because you just make components. The engine's built that way for a reason, because developers have struggled with this problem forever. Right? We had inheritance and multiple inheritance in C++, and you get bugs, you get weird problems, and it gets harder as you scale things up to not use a composition model. Somebody asked your age. I assume they're asking you, because I'm
Let's see if you can
obviously,
guess.
like, just barely over 20.
And
somebody else asked what your favorite language was other than C#. I'm curious because I don't really have one. Like, I love C# and all the other languages are okay, because I don't use them enough to form an opinion. I'm curious if you have one.
Shoot, man, there's this language. Oh shoot, what is it called? Someone in the chat might know. There's like this MIT course. It's like from the 70s or 80s or something like that. That's completely free online, and they teach you this language, or they use a language to teach you programming in the course. And I always liked it. Oh, what is it? Is it Lisp? I always really liked it just because it made me feel really cool that I knew it, and that it was like an MIT course, and that's it. That's all. That's all. The only reason why I liked it.
Fair enough.
But I'm like super. What's the word? I'm like super bougie and arrogant when it comes to languages. I'm like, hey, listen, whatever language you need me to learn or do to complete the job, I'll learn it. I don't care. I really like C#, by the way. I think that's probably my favorite language. But oh wow, a piece of fruits in both Jason's in both channels now on both chats. I'll learn any language. I don't have a particularly favorite one. I think it's Lisp is the one that I really like, just because it made me feel super cool. But I really like C#.
Yeah, C# still my favorite by far. And I mean, most really, like, I've done C#, some other, lots of C++, a tiny bit of assembly, some Java, a little Java, a little JavaScript, and a little PHP. Yeah. Oh God, I don't
Yeah.
remember that. But
I'd
yeah,
say
I
I
mean,
don't like PHP. That's probably my least favorite language.
I don't feel proficient in anything other than C# anymore. Yeah, PHP was scary stuff.
For my day job, I use a language called Groovy. It's basically built on for the JVM and Java. But Groovy is an interesting language because it's pretty much all syntactic sugar. I mean, you can do stupid one-liners that are completely unlegible, but they're like, it's cool. I mean, it's great. But what I've noticed is that C# now is adding a lot of syntactic sugar, and they handle it so much better than Groovy ever did. So when I first learned Groovy, I was like, wow, this is the coolest language ever. Look at all these crazy, they had like dynamic methods and things like that could just come up on the fly. You could write on the fly. But then C# comes along and they're adding all the syntactic sugar and it does it so much better.
Yeah. I like which stuff do you really like in the new C#? Like, anything stand out?
I'll probably never use it, but I really like the things they're doing with like switches. They're doing some interesting switch return statements. I really like how when you do like a literal list, let's say you do a new list of type, and let's say you have a custom class player, you don't have to say new player for each one. You can just say new and then open and close parentheses, and it's just a constructor.
Yeah.
I don't know if I explained that well enough, but yeah.
No, I get what you're saying. When you're putting them in there and you're putting them with the brackets instead of newing, yeah, it speeds it up a lot. I like the expression body stuff a lot too.
Oh
expression
yeah,
body properties are so nice. Like,
I love that.
It feels so much cleaner. Like you're just getting rid of all that extra garbage.
Jason says string interpolation, and yeah, I love that string interpolation.
Yep.
I like all the stuff they're doing there.
Go up here. I think there were a couple other questions. I'm sure I missed some. Somebody asked they want to make games, but it was Cherry Vanilla. Said, I want to make games. What do I need to learn after C# language? Nothing after, I would say. I would say you should learn it together. You should learn Unity development and C# at the same time. Don't try to learn C# and then try to learn Unity stuff. Get right in. Oh, okay. And if you already know Unity, because he said he knows Unity too. I'm scrolling through and seeing the chat. Yeah, to learn them together and just start building games. And I don't know. I don't know. I've recommended this a million times, so maybe Charles has some other ideas. My recommendation is always just go out and build a lot of little 2-week games. Find a lot of things that you can build in 1 to 3 weeks. And if you think you can build it in 1 to 3 weeks, like cut that in half because you're going to be wrong. Right? Like scale it down to just the core piece of functionality. Go through tutorials and build those, and then expand on them a little bit. Don't let them go longer than like 2 weeks maybe, and then go on to the next one and build a bunch of those. Get used to the process of starting them and finishing them. And it's just literally just intentional practice. You're going to get better at it. You're not going to sit there and struggle with any problem for too long and beat your head against the wall, and you're just going to keep improving. Now, I don't know. What do you got, Charles? What would you recommend people just getting started out?
Yeah, I mean, when I was first getting started out, I was working my day job, and that was great and all because you're just given opportunities just to write code. But personally, the thing that like completely elevated my learning experience or sped it up, if I know it's appealing, is to speed it up, was taking like freelance gigs, because when you have to do something like I took a gig where I did an app for Disney Annual Pass, which in Florida, Disney Annual Pass is its own company that's associated with Disney, and they had this activation where they had like this tent that would go all over Florida, and in that tent they would put like these kiosks that had a game on it, and I developed this game for that kiosk, and it was this dumb little thing. But working with that company, being a contractor for them, having deadlines, being in control of the entire pipeline of the application from, they gave me the specs, I wrote it out, got to the point where I deployed it. that was so stressful and hard, but it forced me to touch every aspect from soup to nuts. And that, was very educational, because it's like when you're sitting here, you're sitting in your home office or whatever the case may be, and you're like, oh, I want to write it. Let's say I want to write this game. I have an idea. I mean, 9 times out of 10, you're going to get to some point where you're just like, this is too hard. I mean, I'm speaking from experience. This isn't worth my time, or life gets in the way, and maybe, hey, I'll return to this project. This is my little side project. I'll come back to it. But doing a project where I had to finish, and it was a timeline, and I was getting paid, and if I didn't finish, like, there were ramifications, that was like the best thing that I've ever experienced as far as learning. And I did that a couple times. I just picked up freelance jobs that when I picked them up, I was like, I don't know if I could do this, but I'm just going to try. And, for me, it was like, it always worked out.
Yeah, I wouldn't do that as you're just starting out learning, but once you're
not just if you're really newbie, yeah, I wouldn't do that. But
get to the point where you can build your own little mini games first, and then definitely like that. I think that's the next step. A lot of people wonder like, hey, what should I do? Like, especially if they're working full-time jobs too. They're not ready to make a big jump. I think it's a great idea to get contract jobs that are small like that. And I assume like with that project, like most of those kinds of projects, it was relatively simple gameplay wise. You didn't have to figure out how to make it fun, right?
It was and the whole game was decided up front. They just wanted me to do it.
That's what makes them great, because when you do a contract or when you work on a game like for a company, there's a lot of struggling to find the fun in things, right? And getting that right. When you're doing these little things that are going to kiosks and stuff, they have a design, they have a plan, they don't have the time or energy to go back and constantly modify things. So you have usually a pretty straightforward design that you just build to, which I like. Yeah.
And Jason made a good point in the chat. That's why game jams are so valuable, because it forces you to, throws you in a situation where you're going to come against problems that, you never would have expected.
Oh yeah, definitely. Game jams are a great way. Game jams, meetups, hackathon type things. And don't feel bad if you don't finish, right? Like, or if you fail, like you do them. Sometimes they're a great success and you win first prize and come home with a free VR headset or something. And sometimes you get last place because your idea didn't work out, like, or you came up with something and it totally didn't work out, so you just fell back to something else and it was terrible. Done all of the above,
I've got a couple questions on my end that I've been neglecting. Let me see if I can just address them. What is syntactic sugar? Syntactic sugar, I don't really know like a official definition, but I'll want to get your input on this too, Jason. But I guess it's anything that takes like a language feature that's like really takes a long time to type, or it's very verbose, and it just cuts it down to like a simple shortcut, kind of like a language shortcut, I guess.
Yeah, exactly. It's like just like the string interpolation. Instead of doing string dot format, open braces, quotes, and the thing, you just do $ quotes and put your stuff right in there and inline it. It just shortens it up. Gets rid of all the extra verbose crap.
Yeah. Someone else says, why do you hate PHP? I'm collecting reasons since so many people seem to hate it. I don't like it just because I hate the syntax. I just don't like, I don't know.
I've never seen good PHP code is my problem. Like every line of PHP code I've seen has like SQL injection just sitting there ready. I mean, I'm sure there's good PHP code out there, but all the PHP code I've ever seen or written is terrible, not easy to maintain or manage, and just generally bad. Like I said, I'm sure somebody's good at it, but when I was doing PHP, everybody was a kid and we were all noobs and it was all terrible. So I kind of built up a giant aversion.
Just so hard to read. Like I don't know, maybe this is my bias, but I feel like you could be the best PHP, programmer in the world. The code's still going to be hard to read.
Yeah.
Let me see what else we got.
Let me know if you run out. I got a couple over here too.
Okay. Student here. How do you know when to be using parentheses versus? Derek, if you could just give me some clarification on that question. I'm not 100% sure. I mean, it really just depends on the language feature you're using. Sorry. What else we got here? Do you think it's harder to get into gaming companies now than before?
No, it's way
Yeah,
easier.
it's way easier to get in, but probably much harder to exist
No,
in
I
the
don't think
industry.
so. I think it's
You
easier.
know? Oh, you think it is? Okay. I mean,
I mean, getting into game companies before meant like there were 100 companies and you had to go through that list. You had to get really good at C++,
mm,
and you had to, it wasn't an easy thing to do. You couldn't just I mean, and I guess what now is relative, right? Like I'm thinking a decade ago, 2 decades ago, right? Like it was dramatically harder because building games was harder. You couldn't do it on your own unless you really knew a lot. There wasn't any type of there were a lot less resources out there, at least, right? There wasn't YouTube, there wasn't Udemy, there weren't millions of courses and resources out there to learn the stuff. And there's way less people hiring. The mobile boom kind of blew it up. Like the number of jobs available in the game industry is probably 100 times what it was, 10 years ago. Just from mobile alone, and then all the other stuff and all the business opportunities that are appearing now in game engines too. So
yeah.
I'm eating my jelly bellies, by the way. I just saw it pop up on the stream. I figured I needed a snack.
Yeah, I need to get up and grab one myself. But all right, you go for it. I think I've exhausted my questions for now.
Cool. Yeah, let me hit a couple. I'll scroll up here. Um, let's see. Mert asked, "What do you guys think about unsafe stuff in C#?" It's the new stuff. I don't know if you've seen it before. I don't use it a lot, but I have seen a use for it in networking. So, like,
Yeah.
buddy Kyle built a really cool network layer. It uses the unsafe stuff to do basically networking without garbage allocation. So you can do 0 GC messages in and out and process everything. So I think that it's useful. There are some cases where it's going to make sense. It's probably makes more sense at that kind of a layer though, where you're doing it at a low level API or a thing that you're relying on. I wouldn't use it spread throughout your code everywhere.
Yeah.
Have you used it at all, Charles?
I haven't. I mean, I've read some things on it, and I mean, from my recollection, I remember reading it and thinking, "Oh, that's cool. I'll probably never use this."
I think that's what I thought too. And then I saw the network solution. I was like, oh, that makes a lot of sense. That's the use case. Like that's one where it's
it's a very specific use case.
Yeah. Let me see. There are a couple more. I'm trying not to miss any. How do you start designing a fairly complex framework? Do you have any tips?
Well, wait, how to create a framework
or how to design one? I don't know about you, but for me, like I only design a framework if it's something I'm going to use, and I design it for the use case that I'm using.
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of frameworks, coming from a guy who's never created a framework, comes from I believe they're created pretty organically. I don't like the chicken before the egg thing. I think the problem comes and then someone solves it, and they solve it in such a generic way that not only do they solve it in such a generic way, but the problem itself is one that repeats itself so many times that, those two elements come together, and someone says, well, I should create a framework to solve this problem forever and ever, So I would say as long as you've got a problem that you think needs solving and someone hasn't solved it with a framework, I would say pick out the things that I guess you would need to solve the specific problems, write a high level idea of, the classes, the objects that, would be needed to solve that problem, and then just kind of lay it all out and figure out what your boundaries are and, design it like that.
Yeah, usually what I've seen a lot is frameworks that are developed kind of pulled out of code. So like they'll build a game or a project and then think like, hey, we could really reuse this part of it, and then start refactoring it out and separating it into something that's a bit more reusable into a little package at first, and then depending on the level, you call it a framework when it gets low enough level, I guess.
I guess a good example now that I think about it, like if you think of that famous Ryan Hipple talk about scriptable objects.
Yep.
hey, if someone could, and I think they have, I think a couple of frameworks have sprouted up in direct response to that video. You could look at all the things that he talked about, from game events to the way he used scriptable objects to encapsulate values. And you could say, well, that solves a problem in Unity specifically. So I could create a scriptable object framework. So in that case, I would say, hey, look at all the things that he talked about. There was game events. That's one aspect of your framework. There was the value holders. That's another aspect of your framework. There was runtime lists. That's another piece of your framework. You put that all together. You want to make sure that you have great documentation. You want to make sure that you have a solid test, set of tests behind it that people can run and can look at and see, hey, look, this is a very well tested framework. I mean, I think half the battle of creating a framework isn't that it works, but there's also like a marketing aspect to the whole thing. You need to build confidence in your framework so that people can come across it and say, hey, look at the documentation. It's so well written. Look at the tests behind it. It's so robust. Those things are not only going to make your framework usable, but they're going to ensure that people will actually use it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, you want to make it easy to use.
Yeah.
Low friction, definitely.
Yes, low friction.
Yeah. Before I read another question, I just wanted to note that there's more viewers than likes. So I don't know if you guys got a chance to fix that problem.
Well, and I'm gonna like it. I'm gonna like.
Just begging for likes on it. I don't know. It does help get people to watch it though. I think YouTube and the more it gets likes, the more people watch it. So if there's anything interesting, just hit the button, I guess.
You're way better at this than I am.
Yeah.
I just didn't even think about that.
I was sitting here I started watching the analytics very recently. I didn't used to see it. Now I see it up here and I'm like, hey, those numbers, yeah, could be better. But anyway, thank you guys.
Thanks, guys. Appreciate it. Appreciate you guys for joining. I know this was super impromptu, but yeah, this is great.
Somebody else asked another question. You mind if I read it?
Yeah, no, go for it.
Alan was saying, why do we not see coders creating and using DLLs? And I'll read this whole thing. It said they help with code reuse and keeping the code clean. The DLLs could be made with intended purpose that it's not a single game or not for a single specific game. Do you use DLLs in your games?
I do. I mean, I say I use DLLs probably more professionally. For those of you who don't know, I'm not a professional game developer by day. I'm a game developer by night. But I mean, I see I see the definite value of creating DLLs.
Do you want to explain what they are real quick?
It's a good
people who haven't seen them.
Basically, a DLL is a library based. You take your code, and it's you package it up into this file. It's a .dll file, and then you can take that little package, little DLL, and you can pull it into any one of your projects in the future and reuse that code. So, for instance, let's say you had a little math library, and you had a function, like you had a class that was it was math, and you had some methods like math.add, math.subtract, all sorts of things like that. You could take that and you can compile it into a DLL, and then you can pull that into any project you want, and you can reference that class, math.add, math.subtract, without having to rewrite the code and without actually having to pull in the individual class files into that project. So that's kind of the high level idea.
Yeah, they're just like your compiled code. Anyway, you were saying about you use them in. I know I use them a ton outside of game stuff. So talk. Yeah, feel free if you want to talk about those.
Yeah, I use them a ton outside of gaming stuff. I mean, more recently for the company that I work for, we're working on taking a lot of our code base and putting an API in front of it. So what we've done in the recent months is take out the main classes, the core classes that kind of make up our business logic and our business use case, and we've packaged that up into its own DLL that we've called the core DLL. And then so now we can use that in our API. I create a C# project, a .NET project that's just a web API, and I pull in that DLL, and now I have access to all the classes that make up the fundamental objects that are my company's business is based on. So the same thing can be done for game development.
That's what the package manager does, actually.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Right, the Unity
exactly.
package manager.
Exactly. I think someone even asked about that recently. I don't know if it was in my chat or your chat about the
about using it.
about
Yeah.
using it, what they thought about it.
So just to wrap up his question, though, the
Right.
reason I don't see people using DLLs is, I think mostly because they don't want to have to go in and edit them separately. What I'm using now instead of I used to use them for library type stuff. What I use now is script assemblies. So script assemblies actually just does kind of the same thing. It makes it so that your game code builds out to DLLs, and it gives you projects kind of like you would have there. What I don't see myself doing a lot of, though, is having very reusable little chunks of code that I use from project to project. I know some people, like, it makes a lot of sense for their workflow, and they have those, right? I just never get into the case where I have two projects where I need things that are very, very similar, where I'm not going to need to change them dramatically enough. And I think it's just the nature of the types of projects that I'm working on. But I think if you work on a lot of the same kind of project, you probably do want to have a lot of DLLs, or at the very least asset packs. Probably DLLs going through a package manager that you're hosting yourself, though. So it'd be more like a local NuGet, or what's the Node version of that? I forgot the name of it.
NPM.
NPM, yeah.
Node Package Manager. I use because for my day job it's a Java web application, so we use Maven. I set up a repository for my company that lives in AWS S3 bucket, so that's where our core library lives.
Yep, that's what I would go with too. Did you have more questions? I got more if you don't, or if you want to hit one or two.
You go for it. I'll just read through them. I haven't read through them in a second.
Okay. Oh man, it scrolled, so I lost it. Probably, I have a real hard time. Like, the chat just goes by way faster than I can talk.
Oh, I see that.
I end up going on forever and ever because
Jason. Yeah, I know. Yeah, this thing is scrolling like crazy. Jason says DLLs have one big downside, as it is compiled code. Processor commands like checking Android platform with defines don't work in a DLL. Oh, that's good to know. Didn't even realize that.
Good point. I didn't even think about that. Oh, that's definitely a downside. You'd have to compile a separate version for each platform.
Thanks, Jason. We're gonna have you on as a guest next time.
Oh yeah, that'd be cool. So somebody asked, when making a game of your own, do you work out a plan beforehand, or do you just go with the flow and take the fun things and go? I like to prototype. I like to just heavily prototype the core mechanic and make sure that I like that, and then I'll build around that first. And if I don't like the core mechanic, I'll scrap it and try something else and keep iterating it either until it's good or until I find a different thing. That's the usual way I kick it off. I don't know. What do you do?
It depends. I mean, if I was being contracted by a company to create a game and they gave me like a loose idea, I think the first thing I do is try to write a functional specification, just because
Start on the stream. Like, for some reason, my whole internet just dropped off and then reconnected. It was very strange. my wireless connection did.
If it was for a game jam, I don't know. Are we back? I think we're back.
Are we back on?
Yeah.
I can't tell.
Someone in chat, if you're not hearing us.
It says live again. Let me click on it. I don't know what happened. I just got disconnected from the wireless. It looks like we're back up. Cool. Sorry about that.
Cool.
Looks like my wife is going out for a run. You going out for a run, darling? Oh, okay. She's going to get a kid from school. Never mind.
Gotcha.
Okay, so I think we're back up. Unfortunately, that blew out my entire chat. Oh, and it kicked it off as a new stream.
Chat is disabled. We got chat on my end. I mean, you're gonna bring that back up, right?
Yeah, give me just a moment. I'm trying to figure out what I've done. Apparently, my internet breaks and everything dies.
I should have hosted this. I got Google Fiber. Maybe next time.
No, what happened? Sorry, everybody. Where is I have too many tabs open. I can't find it. There it is, live. So this one, for some reason, it switched to the wrong stream again. I'm going to switch it over to the correct one.
I live in Atlanta, and in my area, in a city, we have Google Fiber in a couple of places. What's funny is that I actually specifically sought out apartment buildings with fiber. I told my wife, like, hey, listen, we recently moved from Miami, Florida, so I was like, I want to find a place with fiber. So we in Zillow we searched Google Fiber.
Yep, that's funny because when I moved, I did something similar. I mean, I didn't go to Google Fiber specifically, but I was requiring that we could at least get like 500 megabits, nothing lower than that. So we kind of ruled out a couple areas that were not able to do that, and ended up with 500 up and down. It's kind of it was actually a downgrade, but
500 is not bad though.
yeah, it wasn't too terrible. I need to rename my stream because apparently it all broke.
Okay. I see some questions here that say, while Jason is fixing his stream, can you share your opinion on additive scene loading for different game elements, like UI pages? If you tried it, did the benefits outweigh the design heck? You got any thoughts on that, Jason? Or are you kind of
I
focused
just
in?
fixed my stream thing, so I think I should be good, and I can pay attention to what you asked me now. What'd you say?
Sorry about that. Someone was asking, can you share your opinion on additive scene loading for different game elements,
Oh,
like specific UI pages?
do it. If you have a big scene, a big game, do it for sure. Split the UI into a separate scene. Split the maybe multiple things in the big scene. So if you have and thanks everybody for rejoining. Sorry, my Wi-Fi totally dropped off. If you can hit like again, that'd be good because the old stream's gonna die away, and then this one will replace it. Anyway, yeah, definitely do additive loading though. So like if you have a big level and you're sharing it with a lot of people too, like you have artists and visual effects people and game designers and stuff working on it, splitting that into a separate level per job type or like per discipline can go a long way. It can really help. Like, your artists can go in there and make the little changes they need. Your train guy can go in and make the train changes. Your particle guy can go and make particle changes. Or if you just need to change, maybe you're the guy that does all of those things, but there's other people on the team. You can at least split out when you're working on those things and not worry about merges so much. And for UIs, it's definitely the case because it's a whole lot easier to manage a UI in a scene than it is in a single prefab, especially now with the new prefab system. Have you tried opening a giant prefab in there yet?
I have not. What happens? It's garbage.
It's slow. So I was doing it with our UI for this one game where it's a very, very big UI. In a scene in the old mode, worked great. Like it could still go through, move things around, change it. Hopefully you guys can't hear me chewing my jelly bellies, but anyway. So that worked good. As soon as I open it up in the prefab editor, it just slows to a crawl. It's like making a change. I can select things and everything, but as soon as I want to move something or make a change, it's like just dead slow. So definitely do additive scene loading. So that's all. That's the point. I
Cool.
highly recommend it.
That was a good answer. I haven't really messed around too much with it, and now I definitely should. In fact, I opened up that talk Jason posted in my chat here that there's some GDC talk about the creators of Inside, how they used additive scene loading to basically load the whole game without any sort of stuttering.
Oh yeah, theirs was really good. It was one of the best talks I saw.
I gotta watch that one.
I actually got to go talk to those guys after too. They had like a little meeting time. I was like, I want to talk to you guys and learn more. I went in there and got a bunch of tips. It was really cool. They were really nice guys too.
That's cool.
Yep.
I had another question here. Where'd it go? My chat scrolled.
Oh, beard or die? Trimming his beard right now. That's so sad. Don't trim it too much.
Careful now. Don't trim it too much. Hey, your chat hasn't loaded for me. Let me refresh. All right, so someone I know used to work on big game companies. He realized that he was working too much and earning way less than everyone else from web/mobile. I guess mobile. What do you think about overwork in big companies, Jason? I think you might be able to answer that better than me. I work at a very small company.
Yeah. It varies dramatically. So like I know like crunching and games and people working crazy amounts is always a topic that comes up. But in my experience, there are some companies, like I have friends who I talk to who are like, hey, everybody's crunching here, everybody's miserable, or most people are miserable, right? And they're crunching like crazy. That's at one game company. Like there are multiple guys I know that are at one company. I'm not going to call them out that I've heard stories like that from, building big AAA console games, right? Everybody else that I know that works in game development generally just kind of like loves their job. The ones that I know that work crazy amounts of hours in the past, there were two main reasons. Either it was because they were really into what they were doing and they just wanted to finish it. It was the kind of thing like a lot of time I'll be working on stuff and I just like I can't stop, right? I just want to keep going because it's fun. Right? Like I'm into it, I'm interested, and I have like an investment in it, and that can definitely lead to you working crazy hours, right? Like I've had plenty of times where I worked like 80 plus hours on something just because not because anybody was driving me externally, just because I get that excitement about it, right?
Yeah.
The other cases are when people try to make long-term estimates for stuff and they have hard deadlines. That's the only time I've seen people really kind of get forced into a crunching scenario where they had to work more than a regular 40 hours a week. And it's like, we have this release coming up. It's been scheduled for a year. We have these features in it. And somebody scheduled out this amount of time for a feature that was going to take 5 times that amount of time. And nobody called it out until way too late. And then those people are sitting there crunching on it, trying to get it done because their alternative is we fail to deliver for our big release, right? Which is bad for everybody. So they feel the investment there, and management's obviously just pushing them. But in general, that's not the case. Like if you're working at smaller places, I haven't seen that really be much of an issue. Most of the time, game developers are really well paid as long as they're programmers and they're not like in their first, probably 2 to 3 years. Excuse me. After that, I think it's relatively easy to get good pay. And I've mentioned it before, but I've known plenty of game programmers who were in the $200,000 to $300,000 range, in Southern California at least, just as experienced senior programmers. They're not, you're not going in at a junior level. And then when you hit like a junior level, the range is going to vary anywhere from like 30 to 80 or 90,000 to start, just depending on what type of job it is, what type of company it is, how much money they have, and how many people are just begging them to work there. Because that's the reason that some jobs or salaries get really low, is because if you look at like any big game out there, like any of the top games, they put out a position, they're going to have thousands of applicants because lots and lots of people want to work on the game. And some of them are going to be really good and not care about the money, right? Just because there's so many of them. As soon as you're applying for anything that's not like those big jobs, that number drops dramatically. Like there are, thousands of people that want to work on Call of Duty. There are, maybe a dozen people that want to work on the Bambi game. Yeah. Not that you have to go work on something that you don't like, but don't expect good pay and super giant AAA job as a starting thing, right? Like you get to high rates at those places, but that takes quite a while, like anything else. But I wouldn't say that you get paid less unless you're willing to take less. There are just people that are willing to take less to get started. And I kind of did that really to start off. I mean, I started off at like 50,000, I think, something like that, for my first game programming job. But I actually took a job before that at 30,000 doing testing. Right? So it's like 30,000 a year just doing testing and writing test tools. It's like my first actual game job. And I was like, it's a pay cut. It sucks, but I really want to work on games. And I had a lot of fun. And to be honest, like for those 3 weeks before I got laid off, I did work a lot more than 40 hours. Right? I was working like 80, 90 hours a week because I was really into it. I'm like, I have access to this database. I have all this stuff. Like I can see game code. Like it's the coolest thing ever. So that was one of the cases where I forced myself into it. Of course, that helped because then when the layoffs came, I got rehired instead of being laid off because my 3 weeks I was completely obsessed.
Nice.
Okay, I got a ton more questions too. I don't know if you had a bunch more pop up. I just look for question marks.
Now you go for it. I'm going to scroll up and see if I find any, but...
Somebody want to know how they can paste flat ads into VR. I don't know that you can put up like a quad and drop them on there. I don't know that they'll have too much value. I've known a lot of people trying to do ads in VR. I think there are a couple companies that have kind of grown in it, but I think that I don't know if any of them are big enough to make it worthwhile. And some of them probably are, but I don't know enough about it now. Can you give some insight into actually testing behaviors? I want designers to tweak private serialized variables in the inspector, but it's not trivial to unit test. Same for hot reloading. That's a good question.
I've thought about that too, because fundamentally, you expose a private field in the editor, and it's true. How do you test that? And I don't know. I feel like the answer I've landed on is just use the humble object pattern and just try to encapsulate some of that business logic in a class that has a constructor where you can yes, Jason says, trick question. You don't test mono behaviors. You test your services. Yeah, so I guess that's kind of along the same line. You push that logic somewhere, a service or another class, where you can pass in the values on a constructor.
Most of the time. So yeah, I'd say that's what I do most of the time too, is try not to test mono behaviors. There are cases where I'll write tests for mono behaviors now that it doesn't suck to do. I don't know if you've tried it yet, but they changed the whole workflow for it sometime.
When did they change it? How recently?
I don't know. It was sometime in 2018, I think. But they changed it from like the old pattern where you had to go set up a whole scene and create all those objects and all that crap. Now you just write an IE enumerator test.
Oh yeah, play mode test. Yeah. I've used. I have a video on that.
They're much simpler than the last time I had tried them. When I remember, I was amazed by it. It was like a year ago when I discovered that they had changed it. But yeah, I write tests for some things, some stuff that I think might break. And for those cases, like where it's a private field, a lot of the time what I'll have on there is the data is either on another object for the thing. It's not necessarily on the prefab. Or if it's on the prefab and in that mono behavior, there's probably, I'll usually have a public property that can be read. And then, I just use that to use the property that reads it. Yeah. But if I'm just testing against private stuff, I don't know. I guess I'd need a bit more details on the example. But I do definitely test my mono behaviors at least a bit. Just not often because a lot of times they need a whole lot of setup. So I'd only test the things that I can't test without it. But try to get as much stuff out of mono behaviors or to the point where you can mock in the mono behaviors and have all your other service code, like Jason was kind of mentioning, do that.
Yep.
So we got another question. When I try to follow a single responsibility pattern, I end up having 10 components on one game object. However, I like the modularity of it. Should I be worried or no? I would say no. I think it depends on, if you end up with 10 components on all of your game objects, there might be an issue. But if it's, some game objects end up having a lot of them, like your player or your more advanced ones, that seems fine. Your simpler objects, like if you got a ball that bounces around, probably shouldn't have 10 scripts on it, right?
Yeah, I agree with that. Yeah. Well, I will say is that I do feel that, and I'm going to have a hard time articulating this because this is something that I've just been kind of mulling around in my head, is that the single responsibility principle kind of gets a little bit abused in that you'll have like these micro classes all over the place. Single responsibility isn't like literally one thing, like, hey, this class just changes this one string and that's all it can ever do. I think single responsibility is like, if you think of a responsibility, I'm trying to think of a good example. Like one class.
Update the hotbar.
Yeah, right. Like
it's more than one thing.
Let's say your class is responsible for updating the UI, keeping it always updated. The UI could consist of many things, right? So, what are you going to do? This class updates only the health bar. This class only updates the mana bar. This class only updates the avatar. At some point, you have to say, what's the responsibility here? The responsibility is I just need someone to manage the UI as a whole. And so, that's where I think the single responsibility principle kind of gets abused, and it does become a problem.
So yeah, and here I got another example I can think of. So with one of the games I'm working on, we have just like an auto attack where your guy just keeps attacking. You toggle it on, toggle it off, and they'll attack. It's like World of Warcraft, right? and split like that functionality of auto attacking into a separate class. So it's responsible for turning auto attack on, doing the attacking, and turning it off, and basically anything that's very tightly related to the process of auto attacking, and that's it. So it's not like it just does the one thing of sending an attack and there's something else that tells it to do that. It kind of handles that little subset. Or I'll have like one class that handles stats. It's got dictionaries of all the stats, and that's all it handles. It doesn't do anything else, but you can add a stat, remove a stat, modify a stat, right? Like it's not just a single thing, but it's not a bunch of things either. Yeah. So I don't know if that helps.
I've always struggled to really understand the idea of the class has only one reason to change. And that might sound crazy, but like I think of my UI example. Maybe I'm wrong with my UI example. Jason's like, I have so much to say on this topic.
I think your UI example might be too broad because you might split that
broad.
into smaller subsets of UI. Like you might have a health and mana section and a abilities section or a weapons section or something.
Right.
You know? And you may split
bars.
those into separate responsibilities, just depending on the scale of your UI, right?
Yes.
Like if you picture the UI as only the things that you said, then it totally makes sense. It's just the 3 or 4 bars. If you picture it as a giant thing with a million other things, it might not.
Yeah. So maybe you have a class that just manages your bars.
Yeah.
And then you can say, hey, what's the one reason it would change? Well, the underlying thing that renders bars changed.
Yeah, so or the amount for your pools changed, and it's firing
Max
off. It's listening
like
to your pools and updating your UI based on pool changes type stuff, right? Like your mana pool or your health pool or whatever changed. And let's see. Oh, Jason mentioned a question or a post about or a thing about when you change job companies, jobs or companies, your salary will go up too. There's also a super chat in here I didn't read. Let me see that. It just popped up.
I saw you got a super chat. I got to turn on my super chat just in case anyone wanted to.
Oh, in case anyone wants to hit it. I thought it was on automatically. I don't know if I had to do anything to turn it on.
Actually, I don't know if it is or not.
I think just having monetization enabled on the channel turns it on. But Sean said, if I want to expose a variable in the editor, but I also want other scripts to access it, should I make it public or make it serialized field and make an accessor for it? Definitely private serialized field with a get accessor for it, and I just use the expression body property version of it so that it's nice and short so that you don't end up with having to write as much text. So you just do like a public type, the public property name with the Pascal case, and then the equals greater than, and then the private variable name after that. So it's just like it writes it down to a nice smaller amount, but definitely do it that way. The reason for that, anybody that's watching, is so that you don't accidentally misuse that thing. So when you do it like that, it's going to be read only from outside the editor so that your code doesn't have the ability to set it. And obviously you're thinking like, well, if I'm not supposed to set it, I just won't set it in my code. And that works fine like the first day, the first time you do it. But when you go back and start interacting with your code later, or when anybody else on your project is interacting with your code, if you don't want that thing to be set, they're not necessarily going to know it. Like if you make it public, there's a good chance that somebody's going to type it, they're going to hit the dot, they're going to see that thing, and they're going to think, oh, I can just change this value, and not know that when they're changing that value, they're actually changing maybe a prefab value, or they're changing something that's not supposed to change. I've got a post up that shows how you can actually screw up your prefabs by exposing those and using the code wrong accidentally. So it's how do you feel about this stuff, Charles?
I agree with what Jason put in the chat, and that's the only time you should ever have a public property is in a DTO, a data transfer object. I just think that you want to hide as much as of your implementation as possible, and if you create a data transfer object, some object that's really meant to be consumed, and that's its job, in that case, you're saying, hey, look, I'm exposing these variables to you here. You can change them. That people who have access, developers have access to a public variable, you're opening them up to change it. And with a DTO, it's like you can change it. It's not going to do anything. It's not going to affect the rest of the system. What is an example of a DTO? I guess like one example that pops to mind would be like if you have an event that other classes subscribe to, one of the arguments of that event or parameters of that event could be a DTO that's just a class that just stores.
Even the event args are almost like a DTO.
Yeah,
right? It's
pretty
just an
much.
object that stores data and no code, right? Usually it's public fields, not even properties. At least on a
Yeah.
lot of them, and they're marked as serializable a lot. And I use these
Yes.
for like passing data around through an app too. So like one of the cases I can think of is I got like ability targeting data where I figure out like all like maybe I got this boss that's gonna hit 40 guys with stuff, and they're all gonna get hit slightly differently by stuff because they do different damage amounts and they're different, resistances and stuff like that. Some people don't get rooted, some do, and put all that data into a struct, which is a DTO, and then that gets used and passed around, and then we'll have other ones to pass messages back and forth to the clients when we're doing multiplayer networking stuff. So
Yeah. Yeah. That would be an example, definitely. And that's how I feel about it. If you have public variables, fields, whatever, you're just opening up that class, its internal state to be affected by some external, system, and you just don't want to open yourself up to that.
hey, somebody asked what a good rate for a full stack senior Unity developer is in your opinion.
Full stack. How many years
So
of
I assume
experience?
that means like you are able to build a game from start to finish, ship it. Like, and you're a developer on the team, and you maybe need a little help every now and then, but able to do most of the project yourself. What would you say a rate for that would be?
Let me go to Glassdoor, because that's how I figured out my own rate.
Curious.
Let's see. Unity, I guess, what would that be, like a senior Unity developer? That'd
Yeah,
probably
it'd
be
be
like a
senior
team
Unity
lead.
dev.
Not team lead. Team lead would be too high, right? Senior Unity. Glassdoor doesn't even know what this is. It's like, I don't know what a Unity developer is. God, I don't know. Six figures, maybe close to six figures at least.
In California, I would say definitely you should be at a six figure price point, like maybe 100,000 or more,
Yeah.
like as a starting point. But it depends a lot. Yeah, the chat is real time. Somebody asked that, but I think it depends dramatically on where you are. Like I talk to
Yes.
developers who live in other states in the U.S. and the pay rates are half what they are in parts of California. And then you go up to Silicon Valley and they're double again. So yeah, I think like as a senior developer though, at least in the United States, like minimum like 80 if you're like in a place where the cost of living is low, and if you're in a more expensive place, you should be making 100,000 plus, pretty easily, I think, as a
Yeah, it makes
senior
sense.
dev.
Hey, what's up, Josh?
Um, um, and if that's
Sorry, I
like
didn't mean to interrupt you
hourly
there.
contract stuff, a lot of senior developers I know generally charge, I don't know, $100 or more an hour for contract work. Sometimes it'd be lower if it's like a longer term project, and some obviously charge dramatically higher, 2 to 5 times that.
Yeah.
But on average, I think you can find a good developer for, you know, anywhere between $50 to $100 an hour in the U.S. at least. Um, and yeah, it's dramatically cheaper in other areas too. Just cost of living's high. Sean had another question too. I know both you guys use Writer, but ReSharper is available for Visual Studio, which is better. I used ReSharper a lot and decided I just liked Writer better. I like ReSharper for general programming stuff in Visual Studio, but in Unity, I just felt like Writer was just dramatically better. It was easier to use. It integrated better, and just it didn't seem to compare. So I made the switch, and really I had to force myself to switch. So anybody who's considering using Writer, like just grab the trial when you're not doing something too vital, and force yourself to use it for a couple weeks, because it takes a little while to get used to it. Once you get used to it, though, you see that it just really speeds up your coding. Like it makes me a faster and better coder. And I love Visual Studio too. Like I see Jason down there talking about it, but it's just Writer is just so much better for Unity specifically. I still use
Yeah.
Visual Studio for non-Unity stuff though. Not that I do a whole lot of it, but I do some outside tools and stuff.
Yeah. I mean, I would say use ReSharper if you're in a situation where, like for me, I'm developing Xamarin applications for my day job. So you can't really do that in Writer. They don't have the support for it yet. So I'm kind of forced back into Visual Studio. And in that situation, I depend on ReSharper. You know, Other situations would be like if you ever develop an installer using Windows, it's called Wix, Wix. There's no support for that in Writer. There's very poor. Well, it's getting better, but there's still kind of poor support for WinForms applications in Writer. So in that case, yeah, you would use ReSharper and Visual Studio.
You would rewrite your app, get rid of WinForms.
Yeah, pretty much.
Because it died a decade ago.
I'm actually developing an application right now using WinForms, and it's actually not as bad as I remembered.
Oh, really? Why WinForms, not WPF or Xamarin?
Just because I needed something quick, and I at the time I didn't know Xamarin.
Fair enough.
I wasn't.
You remembered it. WinForms. If you're building something simple, I'll give you that. WinForms is very easy way to throw something together. I've banned my 11-year-old from using it though, and forced him to at least use WPF if he wants to do that, or ideally something that's super cross-platform. Just because I'm trying to get him. I like that the cat's butt is right in focus.
Oh, sorry. Get out of here, guy.
That's perfect.
I think he's hungry. What time is it?
About 1 o'clock on the West Coast.
I got 3:50, so yeah, it's closing in on dinner time for these little guys. Get out of here.
Let me see. I got a couple more questions I can hit real quick. So you said, should I always use addressables? I'd say no. You shouldn't always use them. Definitely start looking at them and look for opportunities where they make sense in your project, though. Have you used addressables yet, Charles?
When they first came, there was like some blog post about them recently. I read about it and I was like, this looks cool, but it looked very complicated. Like most of Unity's new features, it's just like so much work and so many weird settings and windows that are all over the place. So I was like, if I ever need to use this, I'll learn it. But right now, I just don't see the need.
Yeah, that sounds about right.
I want to do a video on it. And that's kind of why I started like really reading about it, because I was like, I don't really have a need for. I like at a high level, I understand why I would use them, but I didn't have a need for it. So I was like, let me just learn this so I can make a video about it, because I think that would be valuable. And then I started reading it. I was like, oh my god, maybe I'll wait for this to get a little more mature.
Yeah, it's not too bad now. From what I've seen, and it makes a lot of sense for projects where you need to load in a lot of data and manage the memory. You need to load and unload data, or if you want to have downloadable data, downloadable packages. It's like an easy way to use
and you can update them better, right?
What's that?
Isn't there like a way like you can update them, like if you, I don't know, I don't have a better example than this, but like if like a Halloween update, you could change your textures to be like Halloween textures.
Yeah, exactly. You can do basically all the stuff asset bundles used to do, but it makes it easy. It's essentially a layer on top. Oh, thank you, Alan, too. And thanks, Sean, for the other chats above. I don't think I remember to say thank you. But yeah, I wouldn't use them for everything, but definitely look into them, and there may be cases where they make a lot of sense. Let's see. There were more and more questions.
Look at my cat's butt.
Oh, okay. Oh, somebody was asking about events between systems and whether they should stick to primitives for the event payload to avoid dependencies between systems. No, I wouldn't. I would use some shared class type. Use primitives when it makes sense, but I really like to use named objects and classes that make it more obvious what's going on if there's a reason for a data structure. So if there's a reason for a shared data structure, I'd use it. Otherwise, maybe use the primitives, but don't use primitives just to avoid sharing the.
There's a code smell called primitive obsession, and it's just basically that, like you just use primitives for everything. And no, I think you got classes to your disposal. We just talked about DTOs. Use them. You can take 3 or 4 primitives, give them some names, stick them in a class that has a well-named class, and now you've provided readable, documentation that's baked into your source code.
Yep.
So yeah.
Exactly why it's important. You want to be able to know what those things are. You don't have to go look through the code every time and see what the int is. What is int parameter 3?
Yeah.
So somebody also, Ian mentioned that he didn't agree with, the serialized private, because public exposed that the dev can tweak the variable in the inspector. I find it the opposite. So I find that if it's private and serialized field, I know immediately that that field is only intended to be done in the editor and nothing else. And there's really no ambiguity about it. Like, I don't have to guess. I don't have to wonder, like, is this supposed to be used this way or not? It kind of like forces it, because that's really the only way that you can use it. So, I mean, that's kind of why I like that pattern, because it makes it very obvious how you use it, and it prevents you from accidentally misusing it, which is, again, the mistake. I made the mistake. I accidentally misused things multiple times, and that's kind of why I got into that pattern. Let's see, we got more questions. As a generalist with 12 plus years of web development background and an interest in programming, as well as modeling, animation, and game design, what career path is needed most at the moment? What to focus on? Programming. I mean, if you're already a programmer, I would go into the programming side of it. Learning art is, I mean, it's a lifetime skill, right? Like, being a good artist isn't a thing that you just, do as a side thing or just learn. Like, you're going to have to really invest time and really be interested in it, and probably have a bit of innate skill. Same for animation or game design. And game design is one of the things I find people underestimate how hard it is all the time. Like, because it seems everybody's designed a game before in their head or on paper. So everybody feels like they know how to do it. But when you actually work with really good game designers, you see a giant difference, and you realize those deficiencies. But until you do that, you really have no idea how much different it is. Like a professional game designer versus, a programmer who wants to design games like me. What do you think, Charles?
Yeah, I mean, I want to answer the question as, what do you want to do? I think, like, you're seem to be a generalist, and I try to look at myself as a generalist as well, in that you kind of have to be if you're going to get into game development at all. And I guess either learn, if you want to finish a game, if your whole goal is, hey, I want to be a solo developer, and I want to finish my own game because I have a great idea. Yeah, I guess probably programming is a good way to go, because I guess you could always purchase assets and art assets to kind of get you to the end.
It's easier to hire artists too than to hire programmers, right? Because you get those isolated packages.
Yeah. So that I guess programming would be the way to go. But the question also is that even feasible? Is that a feasible path? And maybe that's not for me to say, but maybe you're thinking, hey, I just want a lucrative career where I can do something that I like, and and I can make money and live my life, and I don't want to make my own game. Well, then maybe if you like art more, you should focus on being an artist and just go down that path and get a job as an artist and create assets for a studio, or maybe create assets and put them out on one of these many stores, these creative stores like the Unity Asset Store, and make money that way. Yeah, it just really depends.
Yeah, I'm looking at his chat more. I get the, he said he was trying to build up a portfolio too and doesn't really know what to focus on. I would focus on the programming and gameplay, but get decent art and keep the art simple. So don't try to get like super, like try to build, if you're putting stuff together for your portfolio, build some things that use very basic stuff in an interesting way and make it kind of cool. Don't try to compete necessarily on the visual fidelity side, like get polished, lots of polish, but don't try to go like, AAA visuals, because it's going to be really hard to compete with, anything big, and even show that stuff until you've got a lot of experience with it. Let's see. Somebody asked if this will be available later. Yep. And somebody's asking Jason Story some questions. Great.
What game does Charles play on his phone? I'm going to pull it up.
Oh.
My favorite game to play on my phone. Ready? And this is the only game that I play on my phone. Is this one right here. It's probably a delay. So it's a Tuber Simulator. I love this game. PewDiePie's game. Tuber Simulator.
Interesting.
I love this game. And if you play, look it up on my name's in Infallible Code. So look me up and friend me.
Tuber Simulator. I'm writing.
I play this game every single day. It's ridiculous. I've always thought to myself, who puts money into these games? And I have spent so much money on this game. It's stupid.
I've done that
Still
before.
relevant. What's that?
Yes, I've done that before.
Yeah.
Dumped a bunch of money into a little mobile game and then realized I needed to uninstall it. Like, this needs to go.
Yeah, I've spent like definitely over $100 on this game.
It's too funny.
It's fun. It's fun game. It's like I can't be a successful YouTuber, but I could be I sure as well can be a successful tuber.
All right. See, do we have anything else? Somebody, thank you, Clappy. He said it was great info about the developers under $25 an hour. That's low, but I mean I could see it in other countries. And I mean somebody mentioned up above that in Brazil getting 50 as a senior was high, and I just, without knowing the cost of living though, I mean it sounds really low. Like you couldn't afford an apartment here, but I assume that it's varies. It's so weird how different the cost of living is just from city to city and country to country, and how weird it, like I mean it has a kind of a maybe possible good side that you can work in another country remotely that makes a lot more money, but I don't know how hard that is to do. It seems like it would be difficult, but could be very profitable. I mean, I know people who are U.S. citizens who like go and move to places that are very cheap to live in and still make $100,000 or more a year doing their job remotely.
Right.
Or one of my buddies that moved to the middle of the country into a farm out in the middle of nowhere. Cost of living is dirt cheap. House was dirt cheap, and he still makes a lot of money. They're like, yeah, you really don't have to worry about anything anymore because you can just pay for everything cash.
The trick is getting a good enough internet connection out in the boonies.
Yeah, and he did the same thing you did and required gigabit. That was a requirement for their location.
Smart move. Smart move. Hey, I work remotely and I love it. I mean, I started working remotely about 5 months ago, and let me tell you, I feel like I can never go back.
You feel dramatically more productive?
I've always been sort of a self-starter, so for me, I have no issue working and being self-disciplined. So maybe some people, it's not their forte. I will say I could see that being.
Well, and it takes some time to get used to too for some people. Some people will start and really struggle to get things done. But when you're doing game stuff, it's a little bit easier because again, you have that self-drive and passion about the project, right? You're going to get excited about it.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And it's a lot easier to get excited that you added a new tank to a game than you added, an about page to this website.
Well, and I think that's also something to mention as well. Like if you're going to work remotely, you have to consider that you're going to do things that you don't want to do, and you can't just not do it because you're sitting at home. Yep. Jason says, actually, Charles, one thing worth bringing up. I see a lot of questions about making money and migrating to games. I, from experience, actually suggest not just diving into it, but if you join communities and help out and learn on the weekends, you can start contracting with devs who need help, and migrate organically into it. I think that's good advice. For people worried about money supplementing a main salary with contract rates, our contract rates are a great way to start to feel confident enough to move into it full time. And I think that's a good, that's a good
definitely
idea.
try doing some contract jobs if you can first. And it builds up that the portfolio and resume, so it gets easier to get in on the positions too. You say like, yes, I built this. I built it by myself usually because most contract stuff is really, really small. It's a good way to go. Jason, have you ever made anything with 3D software? If you mean like art-wise, I have, but none of it has been anything other than terrible or placeholder stuff. I might make it and make the shape and then say, hey, artist that doesn't suck, make this into something cool, and then it comes back looking totally different. Let's see. What is the next one? I often find myself using humble object pattern due to testing, so making it usable or unit testable, I guess. But I get weird MVC quirks when I need to access the interface. Then I do an interface provider, which returns the object solutions. I'm not sure I understand the problem enough. Does that make sense to you?
Sorry, I'm trying to find it in your chat.
It was 2 below Sean's green chat.
I often find myself using that one, humble object pattern
Yeah,
to
I'm
the
not sure I
accession.
understand it enough to give a clear answer. I don't know if you do.
MVC quickers when I need to access the interface.
Oh, and he may have been asking the other Jason because the other Jason actually replied right after that he uses Maya. If that was for him, yeah. He's probably much better at it than I am. Oh, and Jason Story understands the problem. See, we should have had him on here.
Yeah, right. Well, I think he's doing great in the chat there.
Yeah.
He's really holding it down. You'd love to move out to the Midwest, the flyover states.
Yeah, I couldn't just because, like, I mean, it's weird. Like, I feel like a dumbass saying it, but like, I feel like I live in the country and it's super rural outside because if you go like, a mile that way, there's not city. It's like just hills and stuff. But I'm still, an hour from downtown LA. So I still feel like I'm like way out in the country. But yeah,
I live in the city.
If I went much further, I don't think I could handle it.
I need a city. I mean, me and my wife, we do everything. I mean, she works in marketing, so she's always like finding all these things going on, and we're always going out to events and stuff. So I couldn't live in the Midwest.
Yeah, same. I need good weather and lots of entertainment, and of course, they're like the most important thing for me is just having good schools, like safe area with good schools for the kids. Like when we searched for this place that we're in now, it was all schools and internet. Those are like the two disqualifiers. School had to be good, internet had to be good. Location didn't matter other than that because where I work is wherever the hell I am.
Yeah.
Sean asked a question if we're familiar with the scandal with Suraj Raval caught plagiarizing an academic paper. I am not.
I'm only familiar with it because Jabril's posted about it on Twitter, and I was like, "What is this?" And I've never even heard of Suraj. His channel looks like he's got cool content, but yeah, I mean, from what I know about it, it's kind of crappy that I guess he did some plagiarizing, and he came out, admitted it, and he took down the video. So I don't know. I mean, from someone who doesn't really know what happened, it looks like he made a mistake and he owned up to it. And I don't think I don't know. I'm not really sure how, to the extent of his plagiarism, if it was a little piece, if it was the whole thing, or if that even matters.
Yeah, I don't know. I wonder. I'm curious. I have to check that out.
I don't want to say too much on it if it's some sort of controversial thing that I don't really know anything about, but I don't know. It seemed, from what I saw, it seemed like he owned up to it, and that really sucks that he did that. So, yeah.
Yeah, I remember when my buddy John did. He released a course that was created by somebody else. They like white labeled it.
Oh wow!
And then he found out. So he released it, and like a couple days after it's selling, they get contacted by somebody else who's like, "Yeah, you stole my course." Apparently, the dude that contacted him to do this course, he's like, "Yeah, I made this course. I want to sell it with you and like do a white label thing." And it was his first time doing it. He's like, "Yeah," and he said, yeah, apparently that dude just went through and copied somebody else's course on Udemy word for word. Just went through, copied all the screencasts, and just reset all the words.
Oh man!
And then gave it to him and told him that he had made it from scratch, and it was a giant mess. I was blown away. Like, who thought that was gonna work?
I know, right?
Why would you?
It's the internet. Man. Come on.
I don't know if this is anything like that. I'm kind of curious though. I want to check it out and see. Kind of learn more. Yeah, thanks for bringing that up though. That's I'm curious about that.
Yeah, I mean, I'm reading, the one place where I actually found out about it was from Jabril's Twitter.
Oh, okay.
And yeah, I mean, reading through what he said, it seems like he and I share the same sentiment. He says, I'm not down with the cancel culture, and I agree. I'm not down with the cancel culture. I don't know the extent of this guy's plagiarism. If it was the one post, and he became clean, it's rough. As someone who creates content, and I know, Jason, I'm sure you can relate to this, it's really tough to be on like a weekly schedule and you're creating content. I'm not saying that excuses plagiarism, but I've put out some pretty stupid content in the name of getting something out. And so maybe this guy was stressed, pressured, people were liking his stuff, and he's like, oh man, people expect me to get something out here, I'm just going to grab this piece of this article that I read because I know it'll add a lot of value. I don't know the story.
Yeah, we'll have to look into it, and then we'll do a full report.
Yeah.
I'll find out more though. I'm really curious about it.
Yeah, I'm curious about it too. I'll check it out.
And James asked if we've released any solo projects on Google or iOS stores.
Nope, not me.
No, I haven't done any solo ones. I've done ones with companies before where I worked and contract ones. I don't think any of them are still available on the store though. Oh, I think that the only stuff that's still up there is private things. And apps that are out of date and haven't been touched in years. We haven't done much mobile stuff in a while. But I don't know.
Yeah, sadly, all the projects I've ever worked on have just gone defunct.
Oh, yeah, mine they're all over the place. Some of them I sold. My audio is cutting out. That's a problem. I wonder why. Is my audio cutting out for all of you? Is it just my audio? Now I'm curious. If you guys are hearing that, let me know. Oh, Jason says fine. I don't know. If there's problems, let me know though. Did you have any other questions on your side? I don't see more. There might be more, but I might have missed them. Somebody asked if they become a game dev and they make stuff on the side, is the company that they work at, do they have the rights to their stuff? I don't know how it is everywhere. I know that in the US, if you work on your stuff at the job or on their hardware, there's definitely a legal possibility that they can take your crap from you. So don't do that. Don't work on your employer's computers, their laptops, anything related to them. And I think you're fine in the US, but I mean, you really want to probably check where you're at exactly, check the state or country and check the laws there. I really don't know. I know that in the US though, if you do stuff at work, they can come for your stuff, and I've heard of it happening, not often, but I have heard of it happening at least a couple times before in the news. Yeah, I wonder if the audio issue is just the streaming problem because it doesn't like the 4K. I don't know. I'll do 1080p next time.
Oh, you maniac.
I know. Come on, I didn't realize it was just the default because I use OBS to record, and it just defaults to 4K, so didn't even think about it.
Yeah.
Until I saw the warning on the screen. Cool.
Someone said, I thought the Avengers Infinity War was the biggest crossover until I started watching this video. You both are inspirations to me. Oh, that's great. I love it. It's my favorite comment.
Which Avenger are you going to be, though? You got to show up in a costume next time.
Oh, I know. For real. Which one should I be? I'll be the Hulk.
I don't know.
No.
I was thinking Black Widow, maybe. Get you in the costume. I said you had to wear the costume, right?
I got to get spandex. I got some.
I'm here, guys.
Oh, God.
Let me pull out the costume.
YouTuber banned from the platform after showing up on stream. Jason was saying, yeah, right? Jason says, this is probably another good point to mention about personal projects versus released games. It is a valuable lesson to learn that if you work in contracting, a lot of your projects are NDA and you have no ability to talk about them unless they're interviewed like you were, Jason. Oftentimes a company likes to brand them and pretend they did them in-house. I've seen that before. Even if your project does get released, it is usually not something you can claim as your own. Yep, that's unfortunate. Life of a game developer that you rarely have a portfolio, and a lot of your code, the code you write, gets thrown away in defunct projects. Game devs in general is usually a life of failed and forgotten projects. And I'd say that's probably true about any developer, enterprise or not. I mean, a lot of the code I've written for enterprise, in my, my day job, I mean, I can't really talk about it. I can't really show it to anyone. I've done some of the coolest things ever at my day job, as an enterprise developer, and I can't really share it with anyone, and half of the stuff I do, people wouldn't even really think it's cool. Yeah, they wouldn't understand. They wouldn't think it's cool. It's like, I write applications, premise-based enterprise applications, which means I have to get really fancy about how I replicate data across multiple regions in the U.S. And I've written some crazy code, but I can't really talk about it, and you probably wouldn't even think it was that cool. But the same applies to game development as well.
And the same with all my non-game stuff. Like,
Yeah.
you make this really cool thing, and like, there's one nerd friend that you can talk to about it that's really into that pattern, and like, you can talk to them about that. That's about it. Nobody else knows what you're talking about. You can't show it to your kids. You can't show it to your friends because everybody's like, I don't know. You're just showing me a bunch of words I don't understand, right? It's like showing a page in Chinese to me. Like, there's a lot of stuff there, but I can't read it and don't understand it.
Yeah. And it's funny, I don't know if you felt this. I mean, you have more game development specific experience to talk about, but I almost get imposter syndrome when people, I've got 15,000 subscribers, whatever. That's pretty cool, and people watch my videos, and then you get a comment like, "So what have you done? Like, have you created any games?" And it's like, "No, not really. I haven't. Not that you would be able to see or know about."
Yeah. For me, it's Oh, sorry, I was looking at the chat. Yeah, for me, it's like I get that if I'm not working on anything. I feel like, how am I going to teach stuff if I'm not doing it actively? Which is why I like to constantly be working on some sort of project, because it gives me new problems to solve and issues to run into, and just experience. Like, if there's a thing, I can try it out in a real world scenario and see, like, is there a real problem with it? But when I'm not doing that, it does feel strange, especially if you don't do it for a while. When I first started doing YouTube stuff, I wasn't doing a lot of games. I kind of stopped doing game stuff, released a bunch of things, and started doing YouTube stuff, and felt weird at first, and then getting back into doing a lot of projects helped a lot.
Yeah. I saw this question asked on your channel before. Have you guys ever made a game moddable, like enabling players to create mods? Is it difficult, worth the work? Do you have any thoughts on that one?
I haven't done it like as a whole process myself on a project. I've worked on projects that had moddable components. It's generally not too complicated, but it's not the easiest thing to start. Oh, excuse me. It's not the simplest thing to like get going with, but it's not the kind of thing that's going to take you months to do either. Like, once you know how to do it, it's somewhat straightforward. I was actually planning on doing a video on this sometime soon. I was talking to my kid about Unturned, and I'm going to go through a couple of their videos, see what their workflow looks like, and then put together a video on how you would replicate that maybe with their workflow, or if there are any issues with it, it can solve those, because I think it'd be kind of interesting. Let's see. Sorry. Anything else? Can you downsample your stream? Yeah, I don't know. I think if I change the stream size or the setting, it's going to break everything. I could try it.
I got a good question here, or I guess a question. Do you guys have any tips for a serial prototyper? I've started countless prototypes that I've killed because I can find any number of reasons to not work on them. You got any thoughts on that?
I don't know. I had the same problem.
Well, it's funny. I saw the other day on Unity, on the Reddit, the game dev subreddit, someone posted a GIF that was like, 30 of my prototypes in 1 minute. And it was like all these prototypes that he had made, in a GIF. And I was like, damn, that is so cool. That is so impressive. And I'm like, I don't have any prototypes to really look at, because I never even make my prototypes pretty enough to make it into a GIF.
You don't get into the pretty part. Here, yeah. Let me show you. I'm gonna strip for you real quick.
Yeah, right. You're my prototype. Yeah. So it's like,
look at my shirt.
Oh, you're lagging in my stream.
Oh, am I? Let's see it. So I got the Bracky's unfinished project shirt on underneath.
Oh my god! Hold on, let me see this. Let me pull you up on Zoom, because that's when I'll actually see you. Oh no, you turn your camera off. I'll watch the stream and you'll come up. That's awesome, man. I gotta get that shirt.
Yeah, it's too funny. I was like, unfinished projects, and it's like little cute.
Oh, I see it now. You finally killed. That's hilarious.
Yeah, I mean, I have a lot of unfinished projects myself. I don't have really good advice other than part of the problem when you do it is just start things you think is a really good idea, and then the idea that it's a really good idea tends to fade, and you start to think that something else is a good idea. And I don't know if the answer is to like stick with the thing that you don't think is a great idea anymore, or if it's just to get things going. What I would try to do though is get them to a point where you can do like a little release. Like if you're prototyping and you're like, hey, this is going to take me 9 months to finish it. Think of like, is there a way I can finish this in a week or a couple of days? Is there a way I can wrap this up into something that I can release and get out there? Because if you do that, I think it'll at least help get past the I'm only prototyping and you're actually releasing stuff. But you start to get a lot of feedback on things, and I don't know if it'll really help or not, but that's what I would try to do at least.
I have some thoughts on that. I will say that if you think about a prototype, the point of a prototype is to assess the feasibility of an idea, and I think that sometimes you prototype something and like you prototype a whole game, the whole idea of a game, but how do you assess the feasibility of it? I mean, if you play it, sure, you might be able to assess, this seems pretty fun to me, but you really need to get it out there, get it in front of other people. Maybe you're already doing this, but I think personally, I found that I'll do a prototype, but I won't take it to its logical conclusion. And that logical conclusion is I have an idea. I've really quickly, with no game art, with no clean code, I've tossed this thing together and it's playable just enough. And I need to put this in front of people, 10, 20 people. I need to go on my Discord server and say, hey guys, can you guys check out my prototype? And then I need to take that feedback and say, here's what worked, here's what didn't, and then return to the drawing board and grow and progress on that. And I think that's part of what I see missing whenever I see people talk about prototypes. It's like the purpose of a prototype is to determine if the idea is feasible. And how do you do that if you just slam it together, press play once on it, and then move on to the next thing? You need to determine, hey, this idea is feasible, or it is under these circumstances, and then now what's the next step? Now I need to put it into an actual project.
Yeah.
Maybe that's an answer to your prototype problem. You just need to take your prototypes and do something with them, or else what's the point?
Very true. We had a couple more questions. Are there any YouTube channels to avoid that teach bad things in Unity on YouTube? I don't know of any specifically. I've seen a lot of older videos that teach not the best stuff. I don't know of any like specific channels though that have bad things.
Don't watch some of my older videos.
Yeah, fair enough.
When the videos where the first videos where I showed up on camera and I didn't know how close or far to put the camera from my face, or I didn't know anything about lighting, don't watch that guy. That guy's the worst.
Yeah, I can't think of anybody who does a necessarily bad job of it. I've seen that a lot of tutorials though just don't show or they'll take little shortcuts every now and then, and it's something that I think I used to do a lot too, and I try to avoid now and just stop doing the shortcuts, because it does give people a bad idea. Like if I make a field public so I can put it in the inspector, then like if they haven't seen all my other stuff and they don't know my argument for why that's not usually a good idea, I have to go in and explain it, or I'm showing them kind of a bad thing. So try not to do that anymore. But I think even in a lot of my old stuff, I probably did that way more than I should have. Oh wow, our stream is really delayed.
Yeah, it is. That's why when you're showing me your shirt, I was like, I cannot see.
Yeah, I'm seeing that now. I think it's because it's set to 4K. I'll make sure I'll fix it next time. I gotta set up my streaming thing. I didn't make it totally different.
No worries.
And then somebody asked too, do you have to be a young person in your 20s to land a job with no experience, or is it all based on your portfolio? And I don't know if you saw Jason's answers right below that, but
yeah,
I thought it was perfect. He said it's honestly more about who you know, which is very, very true. Like knowing people and having contacts or friends or anything in a company, easiest way to get in, like 10 times easier than anything else. In fact, almost every job I've taken came from a referral from a friend, right? And there's a good reason for it, because if somebody at the company is willing to vouch for you and that person, has some authority and trust, like it goes a lot longer than guessing based on your resume.
Yeah, every single job I've ever landed, my entire career has been because of someone I know.
Wow. That's been like 75% of mine probably. And it's just like the way I find them, right? I just find them from friends that recommend them. Like, hey, we've got this opening, we've got this opportunity. Could you do it? Would you be interested? Or, hey, would you be interested in coming to leave and starting something with me, or whatever, and stuff like that. Or I'll just ask around, ask friends. Like one time a company went under. I'm like, hey, company went under. Just kind of looking around, don't know what to do, and just talking to friends. And buddy goes, hey, you wanna interested in coming to work here with me? And got my name in through the door, and I ended up working at Qualcomm for a while, which is fun. It was cool. I definitely say I wouldn't have gotten through the process had it not been for his recommendation, only because they had hundreds of applicants for every job. Once I was in there, I saw the process. And I mean, it was an easy job. I was more than qualified for. It wasn't like I wouldn't have been able to do the job. In fact, I think like when I got there, I was tearing it up, just going through fixing, tons of bugs on day one, which was awesome. Just because it was easy. When I say it was easy, I mean, it was like easy win form stuff that like, it was, I could have done it when I was a junior level programmer for a lot of the stuff when I started. It obviously got more complex and got bigger tasks as things went through. But I never would have got in the door just because of the number of applicants that they got. It was in the hundreds to thousands of applicants for every job opening.
Yeah.
But just knowing somebody there pushed me to the front, got the interview, and then from the interview, got the job.
Yeah, I mean, networking is one of those things where the payback won't be immediate, and for me personally, it took my wife really to show me the value of networking, because she is like the best at networking. She knows so many people, and for her, every little interaction, whether it be a comment on a Facebook post, she's in marketing. She works in the marketing industry. So she'll frequent Facebook groups where marketing professionals talk. She'll leave a comment of advice, or she's always finding mixers for us to go to. Like, I graduated from a university in Florida, so they had a little mixer. So it's like, oh, we're going to go to that. There's a professional mixer, at a bar somewhere nearby. We'll go to that. She's on forums. She's on chat rooms. Like, any little, you don't know, but any little interaction is valuable. Even if you go to a party, with friends, and it has nothing to do with networking professionally, you might find someone who is positioned to help you and you can help them. That's one thing that I've learned over the past couple, maybe 10 years, I would say, that slowly but surely, as I see these relationships that I've built, come to fruition, and it's not about like I'm using people or people are using me, but it's like, hey, look, you meet someone, you kind of just tell them, oh yeah, I've got a YouTube channel, or oh yeah, I work in game development, or yeah, I graduated with this. You just never know when they might come back and hit you up on LinkedIn or hit you up on Facebook and say, hey, do you still work as a developer? And you can meet people that way. I saw where Benjamin in my chat was saying, I live in the Midwest, so finding people locally isn't really easy. And so I think that maybe that's an opportunity, Benjamin, to be a trailblazer. Maybe there are other developers that live in the Midwest in your area that feel the same way, and so maybe you can go on meetups and create a meetup and start your own user group locally. So there's
definitely are.
Yeah, there's just lots of opportunities to meet people that you may never even have thought of. And I think it's valuable to just know that getting yourself out there is the first step.
And the online communities can help too. I mean, I've met a lot of people just online through our meetups and other stuff, and chatting that, I refer people jobs all the time that I've just met online. But mostly it's like Charles said, meetups. So I'd look at meetups in your area, see if you can start one, see if there isn't one, see if you can kick one off. You'd be surprised maybe if you live in a small town where there's only a couple thousand people. But if you're near any major city, there should be a meetup there, or at least more than enough people to get one going, I would think. Just do like a monthly meetup, talk about random stuff. We just do weekly meetups online and talk about random stuff. And it's just a good way to meet people, talk to people, and get better at stuff and make those contacts. Do you have any more questions? Let's see. Do you know people with a job function similar to creative Unity developer, that they're writing code but sometimes creating 3D stuff or designing instead of always writing code? Yes. Those are generally programmers who are just good at art and design and working in smaller studios where they're doing kind of all-in-one type stuff. Very few. Most programmers are terrible artists. Most artists are terrible programmers. I know, like I said, I think 2 guys that are good at both. They're a good artist and programmer and can design a game and give me a beautiful design doc. I am not one of those. I'm a terrible, terrible artist and a pretty bad game designer, I would say. Yeah. But yeah, they exist. It's just they tend to be very creative people who could do design and art already. Like that's just kind of like the way that they think. Like they could easily do that, but they're also able to really grasp code as well. Normally, it's rare that you find the overlap, but sometimes it happens. And most of the time, coders are just like they can manage the art like on a technical level to a degree, but that's about it. It's rare that they're good.
Yeah. I like to use technology to make the art easy, like using noise and stuff like that to generate textures, or, in Unity, you expose a place to set textures and then you just code something to place it in the right place. Little utilities like that make the art side a little easier to deal with.
Yeah. That's where I think most coders are doing that.
Yeah. Although when I was in high school, I thought I was going to be a graphic designer. That was my path, and I actually was the treasurer of my art club and was getting ready to go to the Art Institute. And then I just changed everything. I don't know why. I just was like, I don't know if this is for me, and I got scared. I was a little more timid back then, and I decided to just go in as undecided. And then eventually, I discovered my love for programming and computer science.
I'm guessing you're a much better artist than I am then. Let me show you my art. I don't know if I've shown you this, sir.
Let's see it.
So we did some painting for Halloween, and we painted these 4 things here. So
I'm delayed,
one of them
but
was
I'm
done
sure
by me, and one was not. This was my youngest kid's. It is pumpkin. Came out good. Makes sense. And this one was my daughter's. She's I'd say, only one in the family with lots of artistic skill. She's very, very much into it. She used to be really into it.
With 3 kids, you're bound to have one of them artistic.
Yeah. My daughter's boyfriend's. It came out fine. Looks good. He's a really good artist. I've seen a lot of his stuff. And then mine, I have no idea. I don't know why there's a V on the head. It was going to be like a weird design. Oh,
man.
Yeah, so I was blown away by all the kids, as usual. I can follow like the step-by-step stuff at Disneyland where they're like, draw a circle here. I can do that. As soon as it gets out of like following instructions, I'm like an artist that's never coded before following a code tutorial. Like, I don't know what to do now. Like, I'll just put a V here.
Yeah, like I followed the whole donut tutorial. I don't know if you saw Blender Guru has like this modeling tutorial where you can create a donut. And I went through it and I was like, dang, this is awesome. Look at this donut. It looks so realistic. I'm like, now let me make something else. And it's just like, I don't know what to make.
That's funny.
I tried to model one of my pipes and I just couldn't do it. I think I showed it to you last time we were on.
Terrible at all that stuff. I did have a lot of fun trying to design a pool, though. That was fun.
A pool?
Yeah, just because I watched a pool show and then I saw them using this pool design software. And I was like, that looks neat. I wonder if I can find it. So I Googled it, found it, downloaded the trial, installed it, and just started screwing around, playing, designing crazy, weird pools for fun. Just because I saw it on TV and I was like, that's neat. I was like, let me see if I can find this thing.
That's funny.
Cool.
I got a question here. What do you think about game design as a college course?
I don't know. I haven't seen. I've never seen anybody get hired as a game designer because they had taken a game design course. I'll put it that way. I don't know that it doesn't happen, but I haven't seen it myself.
I had a friend who went to college for game design. That was his degree, and he changed it. So I don't think that bodes well. But I don't really have a lot of experience.
I struggle to see the financial value for it, right? Because I don't know of many like it's not a thing that game companies are looking for in general. There might be some out there that are, but I don't know anybody who's like, do they have a game design degree? I've never ever had that question come up or heard that question come up. And when I talk to game designers who hire other designers, they don't care. Like that's not really what they're interested in. They want to know a lot about what games you play, what you understand about the games, how those mechanics work, how they tie together, how the content works, and they want you to be able to explain what makes the game fun and kind of come up with the ideas and create the things that are going to make the new games fun. So that's more of what I see. I just never seen anybody care about game design degree. I would go for a programming degree, or something else if you're going to do that, or just start like literally. I think if you want to get into game development, you should just start trying to get jobs. Like just go out there and do it. Like you can find junior game developer jobs or junior game designer jobs without experience. They're just not going to pay very well, and you're going to be kind of going in at the bottom. And I think that happens for pretty much all game designers because there's not a way to be prepared, right? Like for programming, you can prepare for that. You can code your own games. It's very, very hard to be a designer that just goes out and designs games and has something that you can show to get a job. Yeah.
So someone in the chat said, meet singles, and he crossed it out. Developers in your area. That's funny. Yeah, I don't know. Networking seems to be the way to go.
It is.
Positioning yourself.
Meet people and get referrals. Talk to people. Be nice. Don't show up and be a dick. Like,
yeah,
you can be quiet. That's fine. People understand. People are shy, but eventually talk and just don't say mean things. Say nice things. Don't trash talk other people or other companies while you're there. It's not going to help. Just learn, meet people, and talk. Talk about the things you like. You find out, like at meetups and stuff, everybody there likes the same stuff, so it's pretty easy to find things to bond on.
Yeah, I mean, is really cheesy, but one of my favorite quotes is, "Luck is where preparation meets opportunity." So, how do you prepare? You just have to, do game jams, practice coding, take courses, make a million prototypes. And then how do you create opportunity? Well, you have to go on Discord servers. You have to go to meetups, go to conventions, put yourself out there. And eventually those two are going to meet, your preparation and it's going to be an opportunity, and someone's going to offer you a job or a contract. And like Jason said, maybe you don't go in, fully. Maybe you just take a couple contracts here and there and you work with other developers who need a helping hand. And from there, teams can blossom and your experience grows and you build up your LinkedIn or whatever it is you use to get yourself out there professionally. And organically you'll get there. It's not going to be like one day you're not a game developer and the next day you are a game developer. It's going to be a process for everyone.
Well, it can be the thing that Jason was saying, I think applies if you already have a full-time job, right?
Okay,
like you already have a full-time job and you have financial restraints that mean that you can't go in there and take the game dev job that might be like super intro level where you're making under 50,000 as a programmer or 30,000 as a designer or whatever. So you want to make sure that in those you just go for the damn job. Like just try to get in, try to work with people and learn. But if you're outside, definitely the contracts are the way to go. And Nick had asked about that question about the guy that does everything. Is there a specific name for it? It's just senior programmer or lead programmer usually. It's usually one of those. It's never going to be referred to as a different one, and most of that's just because pay. Like pay is going to be related to the position, and senior programmer is usually senior and lead programmer, like two of the highest paid positions on a game team usually. That's it. And then like producer, like the main producer might be higher or right around there, and just about everybody else is going to be getting paid less, at least from what I've seen at most game companies. And you might have like a chief creative person or like C-level people or leads, like an art lead, an art technical lead, or a design lead might be up there too. But in general, like just for normal non-lead positions, senior programmer is going to be where you want to be.
Terra Games asked, what games have you guys released or worked on? We talked about this earlier. Most of the games we've worked on are under are either defunct or we're under contract. So it's like, sadly,
At least
we
most
can't.
of the mobile stuff. I did work on that one, Vanguard, which is a lot of
Oh, that's
fun,
right. Yeah.
and EverQuest 2. That was fun. And I'm working on Pantheon now, and a bunch of VR games that are up on Steam, but I don't own them anymore or have anything to do with them. But they were a lot of fun to build. I really had a blast. I made articles about them and blog posts and stuff, but I don't have anything on the stores that you can grab now either to check out. I wish I did,
Your
but I don't
experience is
have
so
any
much
good
cooler
ideas
than
for
mine.
mobile games. What's that?
Your experiences are so much cooler than mine.
Oh,
I've done a bunch of boring contract games, and the coolest one was for Disney. That's why I always bring it up.
that,
It's like
that sounds
people know,
fun, man. Disney
people
stuff
know
seems
Disney.
interesting.
It wasn't that cool.
It's still fun.
It was fun. It was fun.
Cool. Well, how much longer did you want to go, Charles?
I don't know. I mean, I can go a little bit longer or not. I mean, my cats are hungry, so I should probably at some point get up and feed them. But we can cut it.
You can go go like another 5 minutes.
Go another 5 minutes. So it's not like
give people a chance because I know we have a long delay on here. So next
Yeah.
time I want to do this with ultra low and get the bit rate fixed so that it's nice and fast.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, my wife's come in here a couple times to say hello. So I don't know. Let's see if we had any other questions. Did you have anything else on your chat?
Let me check. Anything in the works at the moment? I mean, you mentioned Pantheon. Me, I'm just everything's ramping up. I work on enterprise applications for my day job, so recently that's why I haven't put a video out in a couple weeks. I've just been traveling for work, and hopefully that's all dying down soon. So I've got some personal projects I'd like to be working on, and I'd like to make videos on, but right now for me, nothing. But Jason, you said you're working on Pantheon. Is it the MMO? Rise of the Fallen?
It's an MMO. Just PantheonMMO.com.
Freaking cool, man.
Working on that, and then architecture course. They're both a lot of fun. Yeah, working on MMOs is a blast. Like I've gotten to work on a lot of MMOs, which has been really fun because it's just really different kinds of problems, and it makes everything else seem simple. It makes like all my other game dev problems seem easy when you have to deal with the scalability of an MMO, and just the complexity. And somebody else had asked about making games. They were starting off and wanted to know if they should start with ECS, hybrid ECS, or pure ECS. The answer for that is all no. Like, don't use ECS if you're starting off. If you're just learning how to do game development, there's no benefit for you to start with ECS. It's there so that you can do things that you can't do without it. And everything that you want to do when you're starting off, you can do without ECS in a much easier to understand, simpler way that's not going to change out from under you in the next couple months. So I'd say don't start there at all. Don't even think about ECS yet. Get used to it, start building games, and then when there's a situation where you're running into giant bottlenecks and there's not another solution, ECS is there, but that's a long ways out. Most developers aren't using it yet.
Yeah, no, I stopped making videos about it because it's just changing so fast.
Yeah, it's gonna keep changing. I expect it to change dramatically over 2022.
Yeah,
and just get simpler, more integrated, and yeah.
If I had the cycles, I would do it. I would cover it and just cover every iteration of it, but I just don't have the time to cover it.
I think most of us just don't get a payoff from it yet. Like we don't have a use case where there's not an easier solution that we can just drop in.
And Jason made a really good, I was actually looking for it right now. He made a good comment. If you look at ECS in and of itself, it's kind of like a framework, for writing code in Unity specifically. But, Jason mentioned, don't let your code be slotted into a framework rather than using a framework when and only when it adds value to your business rules. So in the case of ECS, if you just use ECS for the sake of using ECS, all your code is going to be specific to that framework. You're slotting it in to make it work with Unity's dots or whatever they call it now. But, there are specific use cases, like in the case of that one example that they always show where there's like a bunch of soldiers running on a field and they're shooting arrows. Yeah, that specific use case, they needed something like ECS to manage all that. But generally speaking, you're not gonna need that just yet. Not at least not until it's either more it's fleshed out, and I know they have plans to make it something that's completely integrated into Unity, such that like mono behaviors, you kind of don't even realize that you're using it. You know?
Yep. That's what I would wait for too. Just wait until you need it, and you very specifically need it, or it gets super super simple.
Yeah. Someone in my chat says, "Is making an MMO in Unity using spatial easier than you think?" I think he's making fun of that ad. Making games is easier than you think.
I've not seen that. I don't know how it is making them in Spatial OS. I know making an MMO in general is harder than you think.
Yeah.
Like whatever you're anticipating the difficulties to be, expect them to be dramatically more complicated. Especially if you start comparing to any standard AAA MMO that's out there. Just getting all of that core functionality alone could take you years. Like without having it look pretty and be fun. It's definitely
and all the content you have to add too.
Yeah, and then you have to build a world, right? You have to build a game, and then you have to ramp up and build a world. You have to build a bunch of tools around building that world, or else you're going to be building that world really slow. And it's definitely not the kind of thing that you want to take on as a solo or small team. I would say, like, build it. Especially if you've never built an MMO before. Make sure that you've done it before on a team with other people, or at least worked with people on one, so you can see all of the giant pitfalls that you're going to run into, because there's a ton of them. Yep. But it's also a blast, right? Like
if you're a masochist, you'll have a great time.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun, because like it's like anything else. Like, you get this big challenge, you make it work, and then you get to show it to people, and like a dozen people are all doing it at once together. It's even more fun. They're like, "Oh, we're all going to do this thing that you just did." That's a lot of fun. He said, well, I want to answer this question before we wrap up, because I thought it was funny. Do you have cases when developers made some simple games and go to early retirement because the games get enough money that they would never need to work again? Oh, the question disappeared. Flappy Bird.
I don't know, though. I think that guy screwed on that.
What's that?
I think that guy got screwed on that deal. He didn't. I don't know if he ever got all that money.
Oh, I thought he got the money from the ad revenue.
Oh, did he?
I think he got I'm pretty sure he got ad revenue, and then he pulled it off because he was freaking out and overwhelmed by all the money. Which I guess, like, at the time, I was like, that's weird. But I guess, like, if you were in a situation, because I think he was in Vietnam or something. If you're in a situation where, you haven't had much money around forever and nobody around has, and suddenly, like, you're the richest person in the city, all because you made a little mobile game, I could see how it could kind of cause me
I'd be like,
out, but I don't really know all the details.
Well, what about Notch? He made a lot of money.
He did too, but he didn't go into retirement, right? He made a lot of money, and he's like, I want to make all the games that I want to make now. And I think that would be the case for a lot of us. Like, we make a bunch of games. Yeah, Jason's saying that the Flappy Bird guy made 15 games. I thought he made like 35 games before that, or they'd made like a ton of them, and that one just happened to hit. But Notch, like, he did what I think a lot of us would do if we just kind of got independently unlimited wealthy. Just started making the stuff that he wanted to make because he thought it was fun. Yeah. Just why I do this job, right? Because it's the stuff that I think is fun.
That's the way.
Yeah. Cool. Well, all right, man. This was a lot of fun. I think we should probably wrap it up and then do another one soon that's got a better bit rate and a lower resolution. And get together and do some more of these, because they're a lot of fun, and we can convince Jason to hop on or something.
Yeah, I'm sure he would.
Start answering all kinds of questions. Have a blast. Thanks again, everybody watching. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button on both channels if you're not already subscribed channels, and hit the like, so that a lot of people get to come back and see me answer all the questions in a giant delay with Charles.
Yeah, hit that like button. It's super important, and it's super appreciated that you guys showed up. And actually, this was cool.
We should have told them to share it. I always forget. Sharing is the most important.
That's the new thing now, right? Sharing.
Yeah. Don't like it. Hit thumbs down and share it instead. Right. All right. Thanks again, everybody. Appreciate it. To be back. Like I said, I'm doing streams every Tuesday, and I think me and Charles will hop on a bunch more too. Hopefully.
I hope so.
Have a blast with these.
Definitely. Right. See you guys.